Just walking through the dark, scary woods. Yeah, just walking through the dark, scary woods. Hello, my lovelies. I am my crystal butterfly, and if you saw my last video, then you know I am on my way to the annual Writers Halloween costume party that the Writers Guild throws every year. Yeah, getting ready to party, have a good time. Anyway, my lovelies, I'm actually right next door to the venue. I just stepped outside and decided to spend a little time in these dark, scary, somewhat foreboding woods. Because I figured, let me get a little air before the party. But, still got 20 minutes before it gets started. So what should I do to kill time? Ooh, I know. Why don't I tell you about The Company of Death by Elisa Hansen? Yeah, that sounds like fun. Ooh, but before we get into the undead, why don't we have a little chat about the creative mind who crafted this story?
Elisa has been writing stories as long as she can remember. She began working on a book she wished to publish in 2009. Since then, she has written 6 books. However, The Company of Death is the first book she published professionally. Her other published work is a self-published story called Awoken that she published under her pen name Sierra Elisen. Her desire to enter into the world of the author sprouted from her love of acting. Elisa, originally due to her love of immersing herself in other characters, wanted to become an actor. Elisa later decided to transfer all of her character study into the art of writing stories. Creating stories, after all, is just like acting on the page. For her story, The Company of Death, Elisa wanted to tell a story with the Grim Reaper as a main character. Part of the reason why she wanted to do this so badly was a result of her inability to find a series or dramatic story about Death himself. Most of the stories or even series that she was able to find about the Grim Reaper in the main character slot were more comedy, parody, or satire. They were not things that would take his role as the embodiment of death seriously. That's why, just like many authors I've spoken about before, Elisa decided if she could not find it, she was going to write it herself. For her story, she had no desire to utilize the trope of a person randomly becoming death or a reaper. Instead, Elisa wished to tell a story about the Grim Reaper that was about him as the one and only death in existence, which I'm glad she did. I feel this decision made Death a more compelling character in her story. When it came time to publish, Elisa hit a bit of a road bump. My favorite aspect of her story was the biggest thing in the way of her finding a publisher. The Company of Death does not fit into one genre, which is a problem when it comes to traditionally published books. Publishers usually like for a book to fit into only one genre and sometimes at most 2. Stories that tend to fall under several genres in general in the eyes of most publishers are difficult to sell. Elisa pitched her story to several different publishers. Sadly, none of them wanted to take a chance on her story until, thankfully, she brought her story to Falstaff Book, and they loved it. Falstaff Book refers to itself as the misfit toys of fiction. They are more willing to take a chance on a multi-genre story. But despite Falstaff book being willing to publish her story, Elisa was afraid that her story would not find an audience since it is not a story meant to cater to only one type of reader. Thankfully, Elisa is nowhere near done creating new stories. She writes every day, and books 2 and 3 of The Company of Death are on their way, along with several other story ideas she has in the works. When I inquired why Elisa loves stories so much, she said immersing herself in the characters and becoming someone new, living a different person's life for a little while is thrilling. Having only one life has never been enough for her.
Alright, let's look into what kind of shenanigans our dear old buddy the Grim Reaper's gotten himself into.
The zombie apocalypse was just the beginning of vampire hunter Emily's problems. Now she must team up with Death himself in this thrilling apocalyptic adventure series. It's been 2 years since the zombie uprising devoured 99% of the world's population, and the vampires have come out of the shadows to claim the spoils. It's Emily Campbell's job to destroy vampire communes and rescue their human herds, but when a mission goes wrong and she faces certain undeath, she would rather die than ever let them transform her. The problem is that when she makes a desperate suicide attempt, not only does the Grim Reaper fail to take her life, he also somehow loses all of his powers. Now, neither alive nor dead, Emily is stranded in the California desert with Death himself. She has heard the remnants of human civilization are developing a cure that could make her alive again in New York, all the way on the other side of the vampire and zombie swarm infested continent. Only with Death's help does she have a chance to complete the journey, but without his powers, Death is mired in a crisis of his own, and he is not used to having company.
For me, zombies tend to be the brunt of the joke whenever my family watches something that has horror, because a lot of times zombie stories, they like to use the same old tropes over and over again. The zombies are usually the only threat. And when it comes to zombies, we're talking about dead people who can somehow move. And when you think about it, it's how are they able to even walk to begin with if their bodies have shut down at this point? Anyway, I'm thinking too deeply on the concept again. And the good thing about Elisa's book is she did not have me thinking that way, because she shook things up with her zombie story and made things a lot more interesting.
When the story starts, the world has gone to shit. Things were not always this way, but there was some kind of chemical explosion, and now there is a zombie problem. People are living in fear of the zombies, so vampires figured this would be the best time to come out and let humanity know they are real and have always existed. Vampires have also made it their mission to help humanity out of the kindness of their unbeating hearts. To protect humanity, the vampires have set up communes where humans can live with the vampires, and the vampires will protect them from those mean old zombies. All the vampires are asking in exchange for letting the humans live in the communes is that the humans let them drink their blood whenever they feel like it and be their slaves. If a human refuses, they'll murder them and take their blood anyway. Vampires, they're so considerate. Okay, sarcasm aside, things are super bad and people don't have a whole lot of options for survival. Thankfully, humanity is not completely doomed yet. The LPI, known as the Life Preservation Initiative, is fighting the good fight to save humanity.
When this story opens, we meet Emily, a LPI member badass red. Take down those zombies and those ghoulish vampires. She feels prepared for the cause until her latest mission has her going through a little bit of a crisis.
I found Emily to be an interesting character. When we first meet her, she has been trained by the LPI to take down those zombies and those gosh darn vampires. However, despite her training and experience in the field, she is on pins and needles about her upcoming mission because she has to infiltrate a vampire commune as the bait, pretending that she wants to join them, meaning she has to allow vampires to bite her, which to her feels like she will allow herself to be violated by these creatures. I like Emily's perspective on this because when you take a more realistic idea of what being bitten by a vampire would mean, it's allowing some strange creature to bury its fangs into your neck and suck out your fluids like a parasite. So I'm not surprised the whole idea of it weirds her out. However, somebody's got to do this so they can infiltrate the commune, and Emily's going back and forth with all kinds of conflicted feelings because she does not want to do this, and she gets to the point where she's convinced she is going to mess this up because she feels so strongly about this that she'll make the vampire suspicious of her motives. So she goes to her commanding officer and begs him not to make her be the bait for the next mission. He tells her, no, you'll be great at it. We'll succeed if you do this. And she tells him, no, we'll fail because I'm too antsy about this. The vampires are going to get suspicious of me. Next thing we know, our whole team is taken out because I am on pins and needles and all suspicious looking. So her commanding officer reluctantly agrees to not make her be the bait and then turns the role over to her friend. And her friend's cool with it because she wants to take out these vamps too, and she's been bitten before, so she knows she can take it. This makes Emily feel bad, like she's relieved that she doesn't have to do the whole letting a vampire bite her thing, but she also feels very, very bad because now she's putting her friend in a position where she's going to be violated by these vampires. And even though her friend says it's cool, I can do this, don't worry about it, Emily still feels guilty because she did place her friend in this position due to her not willing to compromise about this. And one thing I like about Emily is she, I would say, has more of a very human perspective. In stories like this, where you have the soldier types, they have to be like okay with any mission, be like, oh, I can do this. Yeah, I'm so tough. Yeah, I can do this. And realistically, it's not surprising someone would feel conflicted about allowing something like that to bite them or something like that, or have some kind of discomfort to the point where they feel like they will screw up the mission. That makes Emily as a character feel far more human, in my opinion. And that makes the story more fun to read because it's more fun to read about somebody who has more of a human approach to situations like this versus trying to read about this superwoman or superman who can just jump into any situation, fight it out, and be okay. Also, Emily does have very strong ideals about certain things, and there are times when she needs to compromise those ideals for the sake of a mission, but she feels conflicted and gets stubborn about compromising about them. And she later learns that no, she does need to sometimes compromise for the sake of the mission or the sake of what they need to do. I like this also because it once again shows Emily as a more human character who's willing to learn from her mistakes. As I mentioned before, in stories like this, most of the time they're so macho or down to take the mission. Even if they screw up, they refuse to admit that they screwed up. They're like, oh, it's not your fault, when it is their fault. Emily, when something's her fault, she's willing to admit it's her fault and try to do better. And as I've mentioned more than once, it makes her more fun to read and makes the story feel in its own way more realistic. Alright, as I mentioned in the synopsis, she later later ends up in a situation where she gets bitten by a zombie. She does not want to turn into one of those undead freak shows, so she attempts to commit suicide. Now her suicide attempt happens at the same time as her zombie transformation, so she's touched by death at the same time her body's being transformed into a zombie, and instead of dying, she turns into a sentient zombie. When this happens, she's freaked out and gets introduced to the Grim Reaper, who is very upset that he was unable to reap her from life. So the pair decide to team up because Emily's heard about this cure in New York. And if she can be cured, then maybe they can help the Grim Reaper too, who has ended up in a bit of a situation himself that I will talk about later in the review. But since they're going to New York together, it means buddy road trip time. I bet you're wondering what these two crazy kids get up to. Well, I'm not going to tell you. You're just going to have to read this book to find out.
As someone who is writing 2 vampire stories, I am fascinated by how Elisa decided to depict the vampires in her story.
Leif, in my opinion, is a super fun character, not just because he's a vampire. He has a personality that I found to be silly, and I feel like it added a nice touch for the story. There's a scene where Leif has to escape because one of his fellow vampires caught him messing with their plans. So obviously he has to get out of there before they gang up on him and tear him apart. As he's trying to decide what direction to head in so that he can make his escape before the other vampires can get him, he spots Emily struggling with one of the humans who works for the vampires. And he looks at them, they notice him, and he swings his hands in a roundabout way and blows them a kiss before taking off. Which confuses Emily because it's like, why did you do that? And it's very silly because you know he's running for his life. Why did he feel the need to take a moment and blow them a kiss and make sure they remember him? Anyway, I don't just like Leif because of his quirkiness. He gives the audience more of a perspective into what's going on with these vampires, because in the beginning you mostly have Emily's perspective and she's aware of things, but she is a lower ranking soldier, so she's not gonna be more in tune with the more major aspects going on with the vampires, combined with Leif knows a lot of things the humans just won't know in general. So through Leif's perspective, you learn about the 2 high-ranking, I would say, vampires who are more or less conflicting with each other for dominance in this new world, along with how a lot of the vampires behave. Because when you meet a lot of the younger vampires and you meet Leif, you see that the younger vampires are pretty arrogant and they're very power obsessed. And Leif, who several times in the story you notice he's making something up on the fly, does seem to be more methodical with his actions and more willing to weigh the consequences of his decisions.
To be honest, my lovelies, I really want to tell you more about Leif. But if I tell you more about him, I will be creeping into spoiler territory and ruin the book for you, when you should read it and discover for yourself why I like this character so much. But there is a character I am going to start to gush about a little bit. My favorite character in this story, the Grim Reaper himself.
Poor Death has a big problem. That jerk Time stole his horse and his scythe, make it so he can't do his job. When Time takes Death's stuff, Death goes to meet with his brethren, Famine, War, Pestilence, to see if they will help him. Unfortunately for the Grim Reaper, he soon discovers that they were the one who talked Time into stealing from him. They notice that if they remove Death from the picture, then they can just sit and reap even more benefits than they would have if they allowed him to reap. This really is not good for Death. Not being able to reap souls makes him starve, and it also upsets this whole balance thing that he's really paranoid about maintaining. And there may be a reason why he's paranoid about maintaining it, because if there's a balance being disrupted, that doesn't sound like a good thing. So now he has to team up with the zombie Emily in order to try to stop his brethren and possibly the vampires from throwing the whole world out of whack. Will they succeed? Well, as I keep saying throughout this review, you'll just have to read to find out.
Another exciting fact about this story, my lovelies, is that it is set sometime in the future. And they have cyborgs. It's an apocalyptic world with cyborgs. And that's really cool because there's this female cyborg character that's traveling with a human trying to help him get to a certain location. And I have to admit, everything about her is just fun. Even things when she feels emotions or seems to feel emotions, her eyes change colors and how sassy she is. I just like her. And the human she travels with, he's got a bit of an attitude, but he is still a likable character. And like Emily, what I like about him is he's willing to evolve as a person. He's not that person who stays in a static role throughout the story to the point where it drives you crazy. He evolves and he is fun, and it gets more fun as a character all the way through the story. Anyway, it's time for me to head into the party. So let me quickly give you this story's butterfly score. So when it comes to The Company of Death by Elisa Hansen, I'm giving it the rating of 5 butterflies out of 5. This was a really, really fun read for me. I enjoyed it a lot. And I'm going to tell you right now, my lovelies, if you pass up on this story, then you are not doing yourself any favors. Now, my lovelies, before I go, I would like to say the YouTube algorithm tends to be very, very mean. And if you enjoy this video, please help me out by giving this video a like. Leave me a little comment. And if you have not yet, slap that subscribe button like it owes your money. And don't forget to give that little notification bell a ring. And with that, my lovelies, this video is a wrap. Now, if you please, come with me as we dance into a world of magic.